Shooting it raw?
Yes, shooting it raw. Hello world, this is Ran Alfasi from Shooting It Raw. This week, we're going to have a real treat. So many episodes ago, I had Erden Eruç, who is an incredible person. What an incredible man. He was doing a circumnavigation around the world by rowboat. His goal was, I want to cross the earth by my own power, which is just bonkers. And how inspiring. And so that we had that conversation. He launched from Seattle, went down towards California, went across to Hawaii by rowboat. Let that sink in. The guy's rowing a boat across the Pacific Ocean. Nuts. So today I thought it would be great to reissue that episode because it's amazing. And he's 3/4 of the way across. And if we're really lucky, hopefully I'll be able to actually talk to him by satellite phone, and that'll be coming up right on the heels of this update. So yeah, check it out. Erden is amazing, and take care. Dream big, be bold, do amazing things. Thanks.
All right. Well, photography for me is a way to capture a moment, hopefully with the emotion and the experience to be later conveyed to others. It also is a way for me to anchor that moment in my own memory.
Erden Eruç, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast. And I'm going to have, we're going to go through your story and learn a lot about you. And yeah, I can see the thumbnails of the images, and I already know they look fantastic. I know you have a great story to tell. So how about we just dive into the first one? And this one is called Chance Encounter with Goran Krop by Erden Eruç. So in the photograph, there are two guys holding, it's a nice portrait of two people together. The photograph isn't especially fine quality, but it's a nice moment for sure. It looks like it's pretty early. The sun is coming from the side. It could be morning. Well, it looks like it's probably morning. Maybe it's afternoon, but it has that morning light feel. One man is in a very thick blue down jacket with nice reflective glasses and a toque. It looks cold where you are. The man who's holding on to you, I assume, is taller and is I guess that's Goran. And he's wearing a big Helly Hansen jacket. He's wearing the gloves. You're both giving a thumbs up. You're both making a big, bright face smile. So what is this moment? Why is this important?
This is the moment when we had this encounter in Ouray, Colorado during the ice climbing festival in February of 2002. I had already met Goran once before in the summer of 2001 when he came to Seattle for a presentation, and his sponsor Helly Hansen brought him there. It was a very entertaining one, and I was on the board of the Cascade section of the American Alpine Club, and we were one of the hosts. So before the guests arrived, I was able to spend some time with Goran, sharing with him my thoughts of doing a circumnavigation around the world. And his first two questions to me were, when are you starting? Do you have sponsors? And we stayed in touch after that. A few emails were shared. Then, just out of the blue, I ran into him in Ouray in February 2002, and he told me that he was going to be moving to Issaquah, just east of Seattle, nearby, and that we should go climbing together. In fact, we even talked about how we could do some climbing in Ouray together, but time didn't allow it. So that actually was the moment that we committed to doing a climb together in the near future.
Mm-hmm. When you do your climbing, I assume this is competitive, this is at a high level, is this I mean, is it competitive on a global level, or is it just competitive between you two?
No, it wouldn't be competitive between us, nor was I at a competitive level to be at a competition. This was more for my own gratification. In the
Mm.
ice festival, there were competitors, clearly, but I was there for a casual trip myself, and Yoran was there to promote the brand in their little tent, greeting passersby,
Hmm.
entertaining people in his usual style. So
It's a nice moment. Now, this is the first time we've met. And we've met because Doug Woodring, who was on the podcast, said, you guys, you really need to talk. You really need to talk to Erden because he's going to give you a really great story. I look at your face, I look at you at the photos, and the projects you're on are huge. Okay, so I assume from your name that you're Turkish.
I was born in Cyprus, raised in Turkey. Yes, I am Turkish. I carry a dual passport. I have U.S. citizenship as well.
Right. Okay, so when did you get to the U.S.?
I came to U.S. in 1986 for graduate studies, and then one thing led to another. Ended up staying.
Oh, wow. Wow. And what did you study for graduate studies?
I am a mechanical engineer by training. I have a master's degree in mechanical engineering. In U.S., I earned another master's degree in engineering mechanics, moved out to the industry, then obtained an MBA in '99 as well.
Oh, okay. Is that how you met Doug through the MBA?
No, I was introduced to Doug Woodring through a member of the Turkish Olympic Committee, and Doug was working with the coastal rowing federations to promote his work
Mm.
for beach cleanups and other environmental concerns. So he has been visible in those circles. Somehow they met with my contact in Turkey, and then I got introduced, and he was kind to engage me with Ocean Recovery Alliance. Now I'm an ambassador for the Ocean Recovery Alliance, and our focus is to make sure that everyone is aware of the plastics issue in our oceans and understanding the severity of the problem, then participate in all solutions that are being proposed. So Doug is leading that effort and making sure that the solutions that we provide, we suggest, are workable and that awareness level is up.
Hmm. So, as you know, just listening to you talk, listening to your voice, listening to how the words you're picking, and the connections that I'm making. So, Doug and I both live in Hong Kong, and one of the things that is interesting about Hong Kong is, the fact that obviously people here speak Cantonese, and as a non-Cantonese speaker who's come here and tried to learn the language, it's been really challenging in the sense that it's really hard for me to get a handle on how the language and how vocabulary and all that stuff sort of is connected, and what is the mental model. For example, I've had instances where I'll be talking to somebody, and I'll say, well, how do you say this word in Cantonese? And they'll kind of guess, and they'll say, well, it's actually, well, for me, it's just easier to say it in English. And it's kind of weird for me to ask. Like if I'll ask for a difficult term, like how do you write a difficult term or say a difficult term in, for example, in law or in medicine, and the person hasn't studied law or medicine, they don't even have a frame of reference to even start writing it, which to me is kind of weird as a sort of, if somebody said to me, for example, a cardiac arrest, I could figure out how to write cardiac arrest because I can put those those letters together. But in Cantonese, if you haven't learned those characters, you wouldn't necessarily know how to read or write that word. You might be able to say it, but you wouldn't necessarily know how to read or write those characters. Okay, so all of this is like a weird tangent. I know, but don't worry. This is kind of what the conversations are like. So listening to you speak, and the words you choose, and the tone of your voice, and everything, and that you said, you have a background in engineering. to me, really kind of creates a frame to understand a little bit of how you think and how you are, because in a way, the words that you choose to me sound like, okay, this is a guy who's an engineer in his way of thinking. And so if we use that as the basis for the question, how would you say your work, your life's project, your big projects are influenced by your thinking as an engineer? Does that make sense to you?
Absolutely. So if we could rewind all the way back to 1997, I was working in a software development lab in Silver Spring, Maryland, just on the outskirts of Washington, D.C. And there was a map on the wall with Americas on the right, Pacific in the middle, Old World on the left. And I traced my finger from it, across it, from Washington, D.C., across the Bering Straits to Turkey. And I asked the question, what if? Then, of course, what if I could do this by human power? What if questions were followed by how? How am I going to find the time? How am I going to find the money? What skills do I need? How am I going to finance this? All of these are problems to be solved. And as an engineer, I am wired as a problem solver.
Mm-hmm.
So when I find a problem, I attack it. Sometimes my wife says, "Stop solving my problem, just listen." So I've learned to back off on that one. But if I am faced with a problem, I try to solve it. Try to find solutions, and any stressful situation that I may be facing during an expedition, for example, always triggers that problem-solving mode.
Huh.
I am always tinkering. I'm always managing. I'm always maintaining. It's all about risk management. It's all about maintaining the gear, maintaining the boat, maintaining my body, understanding what's going on. I feel weak. I tweak this. How do I rest it? How do I manage it? How do I work this whole big problem? Because crossing an ocean or running an expedition are no simple tasks. And beyond that, it is a huge project management undertaking. So when you think of an expedition, it is a typical corporate project management task, or set of tasks. If you think of the expedition as a project, you break that down into tasks, and then you have timelines, you have dependencies, you have parties that are responsible in taking care of certain tasks by a certain deadline. Some run in parallel, some run in series, and these dependencies influence the timeline that I have before launch, for example. Or I may have, say, 10 to 15 years of climatological data that I can peruse and get a sense of what happens on the oceans throughout the year, and try to understand, statistically speaking, what the ocean will throw at me at a given location at a given time of the year. So statistically speaking, if I understand the conditions that I may face, then I can plan and I can design a route. That's a problem to be solved right there. So I need to absorb what the currents are doing, what the winds are doing, what the swells are doing. Those are the three vectors that will act on my rowboat, for example. Then I need to absorb all of this, digest it, and process it, internalize it. And based on that understanding, statistical understanding, then I can design my route using 30 miles a day, 1,000 miles a miles a month as a mark to meet. Then I would come up with a route that may work best.
Okay, hold on. I have to interrupt because
Sure.
Okay, so my first stream of study was pure and applied sciences, and then I flipped over to creative writing and poetry, actually, and then a bit of philosophy, and then art theory, and then what else? And then switched over to pharmaceutical science.
You were adventurous, weren't you?
Sure, switched over to pharmaceutical science, and then clinical trials research methodology, right? Which is heavily based in statistics and all this stuff. And then, I met essentially like a mentor, business mentor, who, I've talked about him on the podcast before, who was just, when he asked me to join him, he made me an offer I couldn't refuse. One of the little perks was he paid for me to do an MBA. So I also have the business side, right? So in other words, I have my toe in many different sort of vocabularies. And I also understand that hearing you just describe this big project management project, which you used one word, which we're going to go back to, and which for you is just like it's just part of the background, and you kind of gloss over it, and that word is rowboat. And for people who don't know, just like maybe that just went by too quickly, but let's go back to the word rowboat and ocean and around the world and project, as an engineer, a problem to solve. And so I can imagine somebody who's more like poetic or artistic or whatever, they'll be like, what? What? Rewind? Like, in a way, it's like this whole new vocabulary. And this is what I love about the podcast, because all of a sudden I'm meeting and talking to you, and it's just like, this is crazy and amazing. If you don't mind, I'm going to use this as a means to skip to the next image, because I want to get deeper into your rowboat story, and so hopefully the next photo will actually bring us closer to that. Is that a yes or is that a no?
Yes.
Oh,
Let's do it.
great.
I love to talk about my rowboat.
Awesome. It's a photo called Erden leaving REI. You're on a bicycle, you're wearing your helmet, you're wearing a very bright, visible fluorescent shirt. The image is kind of chaotic. It's not super in focus or anything, but again, it's a perfect moment. You're not wearing what I would consider to be long distance speed cycling gear, because it looks cold where you are. People are clapping around you. There's probably, like in the photo at least, there's probably about 20 or 30 people just watching you at clapping. You've got all these panniers on what looks to be like a mountain bike, and then you've got sleeping mats, you've got bags, you're waving, you've got this nice smile. So what is this image, and when was this time?
That image was February 1st, 2003. Well, we need to keep rewinding to put it in context. I met Yoran in Uray, and then he came to do his presentation in. He came to do his presentation in 2001. I met him 2002 February. He told me he was moving to Issaquah. Then the first chance that we got to climb together was in September of 2002. And during that climb, we had an accident on a short rock climbing pitch in eastern Washington. He fell and he died.
Well, fuck. Wow.
Yoran was known for having bicycled from Stockholm to Sweden to Nepal, towing his climbing gear to climb Everest. He managed that in 1996, the difficult year where that season many perished on that mountain, as was chronicled in Into Thin Air, the book, the famous book. And Yoran is mentioned in that as well.
Oh, wow.
He survived that calamity. He helped bring people down. He backed off initially, and then after the storm was over, he was able to summit. Then he bicycled back most of the way, and he was known for that. So after the accident, I said, this is it. Life is short. I have to get on with my project, my circumnavigation. I sat across the table with Nancy and I said, I have to do this now. And she said, you will, you must. We never looked back.
Mm-hmm.
I went to Yoran's funeral in November of 2003 in Stockholm, Sweden, and spent time with his father as well. Met his mother and friends. And on the way back from Stockholm, on the plane, I drew the world map on a piece of paper, the proverbial napkin, marked the highest summit on 6 different continents except Antarctica. I dismissed that as well. I don't think I can reach that by human power.
Mm-hmm.
I am going to do a circumnavigation. I might as well tag these summits along the way too. So the Six Summits Project was born.
Oh, wow.
So the first summit to do was Mount McKinley in Alaska. I had no sponsors. I reached out to Yoron's sponsors. I got no response back. I Basically, I was saying, "Hi, I'm going to do this" in his memory.
Mm-hmm.
It became my own grief that I carried all the way to the mountain.
Wow.
And with minimal support, well, I decided that I was going to cash out my retirement funds and pay for this first phase. This thing I could handle on my own.
Mm-hmm.
And I recruited friends who wanted to help me. Four friends signed up, and I bicycled from Seattle all the way to Petersville, just south of the mountain in Alaska, in winter conditions. So February 1st, I am leaving from Seattle. Is winter conditions in British Columbia and Yukon and Alaska. And British Columbia was especially cold. Yukon was comparable in the low temperatures.
Mm-hmm.
So I was using studded tires on my wheels for the bicycle. I was towing my climbing gear, just like Yoron had to Everest. And so that image represents hope
Mm-hmm.
and the beginning of my Six Summits project
Wow.
on my way to the first summit.
Yeah, I know a little bit about bicycles. I'm an avid
Yeah.
cyclist. This guy like describing first of all that distance, and then the gear that you're pulling behind you, and if you didn't start being fit, you're definitely going to get fit on the way. You know what I mean? Like, holy shit.
So, one thing that I must pay attention to is the state of my body, how much I rest, as much as I push myself during these expeditions. I also pay attention to the state of my body. To obtain performance, one has to pay attention to recovery.
Mm-hmm.
As much as effort is required, recovery is essential.
Thousand
So I
percent.
cannot run myself down into the ground.
Yeah.
I must pay attention and I must take rest days. And as the expedition advances, as I keep using these methods of supercompensation, training methods, basically using the journey as a training
Yeah.
means of training as well, uh, you basically my conditioning improves. When I came back from the journey, before the journey, we did a VO2 max test, and then we did one after I came back with all that pedaling under load with loads towed behind my bicycle
Mm-hmm.
up the mountain and then back. I had become a machine, and my VO2 max, I want to say, I can't remember now. Was it 27% or 37% improvement by the time I came
Wow.
back?
Wow.
And I was producing watts on the bicycle ergometer comparable to a linebacker on a football team. It was massive power output that I was able to generate. And at that time, that's 2003, I would have been 42 years old.
Oh, respect, man. Respect.
Yeah.
Oh wow. I know a whole podcast could be built around just this photo and this series. Dude, to dive into this is almost it's daunting. It's like it's a mountain in and of itself. So, how do you want to segue to the next image? I'll let you do that, or how would you like to kind of continue this? Because look, I mean, you've touched on so many things. So one, you had this climbing accident where your friend died, and you know, as somebody who was also in a much smaller climbing accident, thankfully my friend didn't die. But you know, he shattered his skull and very easily could have died. So for me, that personally touched when you said that, and I didn't know. That really changed the temperature in my body. I was just like, oh. And but that was a catalyst for you to then cycle around the world. You said,
What I achieved was the first solo circumnavigation by human power.
wow. Okay. 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 So that involved cycling and rowing.
Well, I went around the world by human power, completed a circumnavigation. A circumnavigation is a journey that starts and ends at the same place,
Uh-huh.
moves around the world generally in the same direction, and also meets the antipodal requirement, which is that the route has to include a pair of points that are diametrically opposite of each other on the surface of the Earth, like
Wow.
the North Pole and the South Pole. So as I move around the world, an antipodal track is also advancing on the other side of the Earth. And when these two tracks cross each other, I meet that requirement.
Right.
So it's a very simple concept, actually, if you think about it, visualize it. I should have sent you images that show the two tracks, but
Sorry, man. I'm just laughing
we
because
can,
it's just like, oh, it's a very
yeah,
simple concept. Yeah, go around the world.
we can we can link to it, and I can share a little video that shows the route around the world,
For sure.
spinning the
For
Google Earth.
sure.
Anyhow, so to accomplish this under human power, I had the freedom to use different modes of travel to move my own body. So I wanted to do this self-propelled,
Mm-hmm.
and I wanted to then use either. So basically, I ended up choosing a rowboat to get across the oceans, and then when I got to the other side, on the shores of the continents, I used sea kayak as necessary until I got to paved roads. Then I hopped on a bicycle and carried on to the other side. If necessary, I walked, which was the case in Papua New Guinea, for example,
Oh, wow.
when I walked from the Solomon Sea shores south to Coral Sea shores, from Oro Bay down to Port Moresby, was a hiking crossing by hiking over the Kokoda Track, which is loaded by 1942 Battle of the Coral Sea kind of
Uh-huh.
history, Japanese versus the Australians. Uh, and
How far of a route is that to walk for it to give people a sense of scale?
while I would be lying if I made up numbers right now,
Ha 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 ha.
it took us about, I think, 2 weeks. It took us to walk
Oh,
that.
okay. Okay. So
Yeah,
a fair distance. I mean, I'm
it was a fair distance. If I were to split from our interview and look it up, I could, but we can provide these as links.
It's okay. Yeah, yeah. For anybody who's listening who wants a frame of reference, just it's humongous. It's a long way to
Yeah,
walk.
it is. And you're walking across tropical terrain, muddy, rainy terrain, crossing rivers that swell up with each rain,
Yeah.
not knowing whether or not you'll be able to cross because the rain in the morning could swell up the river and you may be trapped on the wrong side. So there was one crossing where we had to put the backpack overhead
Uh huh. Uh huh.
and sink into the river down
Yeah.
to our necks to cross. And that was a critical crossing too. Any higher, we would not have been able
Right.
to cross and wait.
And Papua New Guinea has a lot of vertical terrain, right? I mean, not on Nepal, but it's got some pretty high vertical they have to cross. No.
It wasn't the Kokoda track doesn't venture too high in altitude. There are some challenging mountains. Karsten's Pyramid is on the west side in West Papua, part of Indonesia right now. So that is actually the highest point in Oceania.
Yeah.
I did not go there
Okay.
because the logistics was just going to prove too difficult trying to arrange guides. And my goal was to finish a circumnavigation. I could not make the challenge any bigger than it already
No, for
was.
sure.
So I aimed for Kosciuszko.
Yeah.
Kosciuszko is the highest point in Australia,
Okay.
continent, island of Australia, let's say, which is a continent in its own right. Oceania includes Papua New Guinea and surrounding islands, including New Zealand. So if we are talking Oceania, highest point is Karsten's Pyramid in
Got
West
it.
Papua. If we're talking Australia, mainland, Kosciuszko is the highest point, which is only about 2,000 meters high. It's
Okay.
a big hill to walk. So Nancy was able to join me there, and we walked up that mountain together.
Mm-hmm.
Had a wonderful time.
Nice.
That was April 2010.
Wow, wow. Okay, so as you're explaining this to me, which is really it's this funny thing of, I mean, I guess you could just take it for granted, not think about it, but yeah, I like to think about photographs. So you're telling me these stories about Papua New Guinea, but my face is looking at this photo of you wearing like what is cold weather cycling gear. It looks like pile pants. Got your, you've got a pile sort of hat under your cycling helmet. You're wearing gloves. So as you're telling me about like hiking across this equatorial island, I'm essentially watching these people clapping, Westerners clapping as you're kind of cycling for what I know to be north. So let's move on to the next photograph, because the next photograph, I can just see the thumbnail. Just from the thumbnail is just nuts. So this photograph is titled "Rowing on the Indian Ocean," and so it's a photograph made from above. It could be done by a drone. It's like one of those aerial photographs, not too high up. I'd say probably maybe 20 meters up, or let's say about 60 or 50 feet above. There's a what looks like a very slick, amazingly well designed rowboat. So it's a yellow hulled rowboat. There's a fit man in a white long sleeve in the bright sun, rowing away. The rowboat has like a couple of solar panels. It's got the Turkish flag flying. It's basically the boat in a very, very, very dark blue, which now, well, clearly is the Indian Ocean. And so, what is the story behind this incredible photograph?
Yes. So after Nancy and I climbed Kosciuszko, which became the second summit to be done in Australian continent, I continued on the Nullarbor Strait to Western Australia and launched again by rowboat from Carnarvon in northwestern Australia. My goal was to reach Africa to climb Kilimanjaro. I bypassed Everest and Elbrus due to the financial crisis in 2008, 2010, and the sponsorships being sparse.
Mm-hmm.
Our budget deficit had already reached $230,000 or so. By then, we said we can't afford Everest right
Oh,
now.
wow.
The climb itself would be too expensive, and also the time spent on the road would add to the expenses. Every time I moved and spent another month on the road,
Mm-hmm.
we would be paying through our noses.
Yeah.
So we decided, okay, I am going to cross over to Africa, and Kilimanjaro will be the next. I'll get to Everest and Elbrus later. So with that decision, I launched. But the concern in approaching Africa was piracy in Western Indian Ocean.
Mm-hmm.
So Somali pirates were active. So I tried to get information, and one of the sources of information was the Turkish Navy. They had a frigate in those waters, and they were part of what was called the Combined Task Force. An international fleet of warships were coordinating with each other to patrol those waters to
Mm.
try to suppress the piracy activity. And every 4 months, the flagship would change from one country to the next.
Mm.
With my luck, during the 4 months that I was at sea approaching Africa, the Turkish frigate Gaziantep became the flagship.
Mm-hmm.
So they were in charge. They could dictate their own schedule. And they came 2 degrees south of their area of responsibility, which was 10 North, and they came down to find me just northwest of Madagascar, put a helicopter up in the air. At 1 p.m. on 30th of October 2010, they came and found me.
Wow.
So this that was a meaningful time for me, because this was the first time that a Turkish warship and a Turkish adventurer,
Mm-hmm.
not even a sailor, right?
Yeah.
Even sailors, this had never happened before. So a Turkish person,
Mm-hmm.
mariner, met with the Turkish warship like that, and then
Wow.
they documented it, and it was a proud moment for all of us. and 29th of October is the day that the Turkish Republic was declared in 1923. So
Hmm.
it's an especially meaningful day for us, and it was a gift to the nation, if you
Yeah.
will.
Just to make it real, okay. So we call it like a rowboat, but like, look, it's a very slick, very sophisticated looking vessel. It's probably so. What's the length? It looks like it's about 4 or 5 meters long.
No, it's actually 7.1 meters long. That rowboat was designed for two people, and there are three rowing stations on it. If both people are rowing, it would be the front and aft positions.
Yeah.
And if there are two people, then one would be in the cabin and one would be rowing in the middle station. Rowing in the middle station changed the trim a little bit, and the boat tended to, with high winds, it would tend to broach a bit. So I am now going to be favoring the aft position going forward in my next expedition. This boat is specially designed for oceans,
Uh huh.
for crossing oceans.
Oh
The
wow.
deck is covered, so there are holds below deck that are also my storage area for all my supplies and victuals.
Mm-hmm.
And there's ballast for under my rowing station, a total of 150 kilos. 100 liters of water sits in 5-liter jugs under
Mm-hmm.
my rowing station as well. That's spare water for me.
Mm-hmm.
I have solar panels that I use to charge my batteries. I added additional custom panels all over the boat on the remaining surfaces that don't have solar panels
Mm-hmm.
on in that picture. So now I'm going to be launching on this next crossing with an additional 180 watts of capacity, added capacity. The panels that you see there are total of 115. So I have a total of 300 watts of
Mm-hmm.
power production capacity on the rowboat. That I will never have power issues again, I hope. And with the charging of the batteries, then I can operate my desalinator, which makes fresh water.
Yeah.
I can operate my chart plotter. I have a 12-volt system. Everything runs off of that. I have everything on that boat: VHF radio, chargers, gauges, AIS, which is automatic information system that lets other vessels know where I am, how fast I'm moving, in which direction, and I
Mm-hmm.
see the same about other vessels around me. I have an active radar transponder on that vessel, for example. When I receive a radar signal from afar over the horizon, it responds back
Yeah.
to them, basically making me appear bigger than I am. So these kinds of features are built into this boat. The
Mm-hmm.
deck, as I suggested, is covered, meaning the if a wave broke over the gunnels and water got onto the deck, it wouldn't fill and sink.
Mm-hmm.
It would simply fill, get heavy, sloshy, and then dump that water out of the scuppers on either side and rise back up. So this boat will not sink if structural integrity is not compromised.
Are you wearing a seatbelt?
No.
No.
But I am tied to the boat by the ankle with a 20-foot line.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
So I am the first thing I do as soon as I get out of the cabin is to clip my at the end of my line to a jack line that runs the length of the deck, and I am always attached to the boat.
Mm-hmm.
If I stand up and somehow I lose my balance, fall in the water, I cannot swim fast enough to catch this boat.
Sure.
The waves and the winds will carry the boat, and she'll just run away.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So I have to remain attached to the boat.
Incredible. Incredible. Okay. So.
And also, there's a huge riding moment built into this design, with the ballast sitting below me and all the supplies below deck. Everything is contained down low, so the center of mass is low. And also, as long as the cabin is not flooded, that's important. I have to pay extra attention. I have to be very intentional about keeping track of what the waves are doing when I open the hatches,
Mm-hmm.
and don't keep the hatches open longer than is absolutely necessary. Uh, Ventilation is another issue. We'll talk about that later if necessary. But what I'm trying to get at is the cabin volume is a mass of air, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's the
Mm-hmm.
void.
Mm-hmm.
So when the boat tips, there's a center of mass that pulls it down, and there is the buoyancy of the cabin that lifts it up. So that creates a very strong riding moment.
Yeah.
This boat just does not like to be on its side or upside down.
Yeah.
So she'll come right side up again quickly.
Wow. Okay, so in this particular photograph, how long are you? Was that stage? Were you in the water rowing?
That should be about 110 days or so on the Indian Ocean.
Wow. So that's like 3.5 months, right? Of people of just
Yeah. So that was October. I left Australia in July, and that's October. And in November, sometime I made landfall at Madagascar. I had to get off the water because it was turning into cyclone season. There were water spouts lining up around me, just a chain of them, three,
huh,
four of them in a row. I could see it was starting to get a bit dicey,
yeah,
so I needed to get off the water quickly.
huh. So rewind in your mind to that time. I'm assuming you're connected to the world by communications or whatever, but can you think of can you describe a moment where because I mean myself my own interest, how we met through Doug, in terms of the ocean, in terms of marine health. Can you think of a moment when it was almost like a cinematic moment where you're just like, this is the a perfect moment of how beautiful the oceans are. Either because of an animal interaction, a series of animal interactions, or whatever. Like for myself, for example, my wife and I went and we kind of volunteered to do whale and dolphin research in the Azores, right? So in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. And at one point, I think there were about 4 or 5 whales feeding, right? And they were eating mackerel or krill or something, and they were just coming from the bottom, feeding. It was just so sublime and so powerful that to me that was just one of those moments where years later I talk about it to this new friend, new stranger I've met. Was there a moment in this particular stage of you rowing across the water that really stands out, an inspiring or beautiful moment of being out at sea?
Well, there is not one single, but many such moments, and that's what draws me back to these oceans. Every sunset, every sunrise is an opportunity to observe majesty. And when creatures show up around me, regardless of their size or species, it excites me. It adds to the experience, and it also brings me right back to the moment because I tend to vacillate. I tend to go back and forth between dealing with the past and planning the future and not being in the present. That
Okay.
happens a lot. The mind just races back and forth, and that's something that I need to rein in and pay special attention to control.
You sound like a perfectly healthy human being. Amazing.
Meditation is an oft used word, so you can't just focus on your breathing, but you focus on the insertion of the oars in the water. You focus on your posture, you focus on your technique. Uh, you can focus on, um, you know, left butt cheek that is pressing against the seat kind of thing. So basically, you differentiate different sensations
Uh huh.
and you focus on that, take your mind off of it, or you basically give yourself a task. Say, I am now going to do multiplication table.
Right.
Start with 1 times 1 equals 1, 1 times 2 equals 2, 1 times 3 equals 3. You just keep going like that. You get the 4 times 1. By then, you have forgotten what the issue was, and that thought is gone. Whatever was bugging you is out
Awesome.
of your mind. You start from, because by the time you get to 4 times 1, clearly a bird or a fish has shown up, and you're
Mm-hmm.
now paying attention to that.
Mm-hmm.
So, what stands out for me as experience are these visits. One such visit was a whale, southern right whale, that surfaced right next to my rowboat on
Oh wow.
my starboard side as I was leaving from Carnarvon in Shark
Wow.
Bay. So when these whales migrate, they migrate north to Kimberley, which is northwestern Australia,
Uh-huh.
and those are shallower waters. And in those waters, they calve, and they then start their southerly migration. They come into Shark Bay with their young, and they suckle the young there. And these young then gain weight very quickly. These whales can produce, I can't remember the number now, it's like 200 liters a day, kind of massive numbers of milk.
Mm-hmm.
And these young ones gain weight quickly. Once they gain enough weight, then they're ready for the trip to southern
Mm.
oceans. They go down, and the gestation period, if I remember correctly, was 2 years for these cows.
Mm-hmm.
And they come back, and the next season they are pregnant again,
Yeah.
and so they're suckling and carrying a young one too at the same time. And these are so they spend time in Shark Bay.
Mm-hmm.
It's not unusual for one to encounter these whales in that protected waters. Shark Bay has a big peninsula that juts from the south pointing north, and that is formed by the uh, currents
Mm-hmm.
and the winds that are running in that direction too.
Yeah.
So when these whales tuck into Shark Bay, they're protected from the southwesterly swells
Yeah.
that pound on those shores. So the young then are protected in those calm waters. They can spend time and just chill.
Mm.
So as I was leaving, one of them came to check me out. It was just turning dark, and I heard this big puff, and there was the smell of fish in the
Yeah.
air. The breath stank like
Yeah.
fish.
So stinky.
And kayakers talk about in the Northwest, Pacific Northwest here, kayakers talk about getting whale snot on them.
Mm-hmm.
If you do, you will stink for the rest of the
No, it's
day.
so stinky. It is so stinky.
But I didn't get any of that. And I quickly reached for my light switch and turned on my navigation light to give him or her an idea of what I was.
Mm-hmm.
So it didn't get too friendly. And then it passed under my rowboat and surfaced a bit farther on my port side, and that was the last that I saw it.
Oh wow.
So those are the kinds of memories that stick.
Amazing.
When you see birds chasing each other, big frigate birds pressing, or shearwaters pressing the terns,
Mm-hmm.
sooty terns, for example, for their catch.
Yeah.
So what happens is a sooty tern catches a flying fish. A flying fish pops out of the water because a dorado is chasing it.
Mm-hmm.
And the flying fish has no chance. It escaped from the dorado, but in the air, it's picked up by either a frigate bird or another.
Yeah. Bird.
I'm trying to say the pelagic species. I'm trying to say the word I'm looking for is pelagic, meaning open water. These pelagic birds then pick that up. So if a smaller bird picks it up, then a larger bird will come and harass it until it throws up. And
Right.
as the fish is flying down, the bigger bird will come and swoop it.
Wow.
They pirate from each other that way. So it's always entertaining to
Uh-huh.
see these birds. And then you'll get a storm petrel, for example, which is a small bird which has this khaki color with white stripe right at its rump, and it'll be flitting on the water. It'll just be pacing on the water like this and just going up and down with the waves.
Mm-hmm.
And what it's doing is grazing for small plankton and other stuff that it
Mm-hmm.
needs. So that is an entertaining thing to watch
Mm-hmm.
because it is so masterful.
Yeah.
It's a small bird, but it's so masterful in that chaotic environment, and it is just a wonder of nature
Mm-hmm.
that you can see that stuff.
Yeah, first of all, this was a perfect segue into the next photograph. It's called Migrating Easternwood Peewee Catching a Breeze. It's blue sky, and it's a kind of open sky that when it's a sunny day out in the ocean, because there's nothing protecting or stopping the clouds from coming in and just traveling, you can see some slight cumulus off in the distance. There seems to be a PVC piping, could be a mast of sorts, and then there's fishing line going across, and your tanned, bearded, smiling face is just kind of there, and it's such a sweet photograph. And then holding on to this fishing line is when you could see the curled toes of this beautiful bird, and it's this bird looking off to the left. So you're looking at the bird and the camera. The photograph is this perfect portrait of this beautiful, sweet little bird that probably lives a very hard life out at sea.
Yeah.
This isn't. We, as humans, we tend to kind of romanticize and sweet, cute little bird, blah blah blah. It's like, no way, dude. This is brutal life, tough survival, and you calling it, catching a breeze, probably enjoying the rest of sitting there. So I'm assuming this is one of those moments where you just have this nice bird landing, and you're just like watching it and having this connection. So
Yeah.
where were you?
That was
Yeah, go for it.
that was a special moment. That was in the Gulf of Mexico,
Oh wow.
north of Yucatan Peninsula. That bird that you see, the easternwood peewee, catching a breather, is actually not a pelagic species.
Uh huh.
It's a land species. It
Yeah.
needs land to roost or to feed, to rest, to do everything that it needs to do. It will not survive at sea.
Mm-hmm.
What it is doing is migrating from the north end of Yucatan Peninsula to mainland USA. This is early May 2012. I am approaching the finish of my rowing phases of my circumnavigation. Once I
Mm.
reach Louisiana, Cameron, Louisiana, just northwest of this, where this picture was taken,
Mm-hmm.
I will then continue overland for another month to Bodega Bay, where I had started 5 years, 11 days earlier to finish the circumnavigation. So this is a moment, possibly day 50, maybe 55. It took me 69 days from Venezuela to Louisiana to complete the Caribbean Sea, Yucatan Channel to all the way across the Gulf of Mexico to Louisiana to finish that leg. So these birds, when the season comes, April, May, they start migrating north. They launch. I saw hummingbirds the
Huh.
size of big bumblebees buzzing overhead. There's no way you can catch those in a camera or anything. They
Mm-hmm.
just come out of nowhere,
Yeah.
just buzzing overhead and just heading north.
Wow.
That's where they're going, and they have to make that crossing in one go. That's a distance of about 400 miles.
Mm-hmm.
They have to make that and hope that the winds are not going to be opposing them and not get knocked out of the sky
Yeah.
or lose their direction somehow. But they know where to go. They're heading north. They're going to go to the right latitudes and then find a partner, build a nest,
Mm.
have babies, turn around, come back to Yucatan the next winter again.
Let me interrupt quickly, just to give some. Okay, so just because the in the photograph, as you're describing this, I'm kind of
Yeah.
reappreciating the size of this little bird. Actually, so it, because of the perspective, it's kind of hard to give a sense of scale. But now that you describe it, I'm looking at it closer. I mean, this bird is
It's
probably the size of
it's the
what?
size of my index finger.
Yeah, it's
It's this
tiny.
tiny little bird, and I am practically hugging that bird if you pay attention.
Yeah.
I am holding the camera in my hand.
Uh huh.
That bird is pretty much about even with my elbow.
Mm-hmm.
As I am slowly reaching around to take that picture,
Uh,
and that's why I'm grinning so big that I was actually able to do that. I
amazing.
am coming around to take that picture and get both of us in the frame without bothering this bird because I did not want to push it off the boat. I wanted
Unbelievably good
the
photo.
boat to get all the rest that it could before it took off again.
Uh huh. Uh huh. Oh man.
So it was a special moment. It trusted me.
I interrupted, but then I was just as you're describing, I was like, wait a second, this is a really
Yeah,
incredible photo.
yeah.
Okay, okay. So, but you're saying so you're
Great care was applied in taking that picture, and no birds were harmed.
awesome. Okay, so you're paddling. You're going. I mean, the cut two things that are occurring to me. You know, in this hour that we've been speaking is one is that you're a total weirdo, and you're
Yeah, I've been called that.
you are
Crazy is another.
for somebody who spends that long out at sea, and yeah, there is that meditative quality of cycling, for example, of rowing, of actually physical, of hiking. The physicality of just the monotony of doing it over and over again is purely meditative, and to be like that. Let's rewind to that moment where you finally decided to do this, because I could talk to you for days, and I'm sure you'd entertain you with stories for years. But let's go back to that moment where you decided to undertake this absolutely huge expedition, adventure, challenge. What kind of person are you that you would say, yeah, fuck it, I'll just do it? Like, you know what I mean? Like, what that you would just say, you know what, I'm gonna bite this huge. Is it the search for some kind of glory, the search for some kind of to beat the challenge, a personal drive? Like, what fuels this ambition in you?
It all started, as I alluded earlier, by tracing my finger across a map. I had been a physical person from a young age, and I lived for the weekend. I was a weekend warrior. I would work all week to earn the weekend so I could go climbing on the weekends. And I would daydream looking out the window, not off the corner office and becoming a C-suite officer in a company, but of walking the high ridges of tall mountains.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the kind of person I was. I was working to earn money to and earn the time, the vacation to go do stuff. And the daydreaming, the idea that I could actually go around the world by human power, when I figured out how and then figured out all the details, was this background obsession.
Mm-hmm.
And when Yoran's accident happened, I stopped making excuses. I no longer was seeking all the answers. I no longer was looking for sponsors. I no longer was trying to make it all perfect before I took the first step.
Mm.
We have a saying in Turkish: the caravan will sort itself once it starts moving.
Mm.
So basically, all the camels will line up. Once they start walking, they
Can
will
you
follow each other's tail,
can you
right?
say it? Can you say
But
it in Turkish for me?
kervan yolda düzülür.
I love it.
So basically, the caravan will sort itself, will line up on the way. All the animals will start together, and then one will lead, and everybody will fall behind it, and you'll have a string of animals following each other. So anyway, basically the idea is that you have to start at some point and let the chips fall where they may.
Mm-hmm.
That's how you can literally translate it. So the process starts, and as the process evolves, you have already made some preparations toward this. You have some control over the process itself, but the intentions are made public. The resources are applied to this, and you start then acting on those intentions, and the whole ball of wax starts getting bigger and
Mm.
starts rolling, and then you got an expedition in your hands. So
Amazing.
anyway, when you have spent so much time daydreaming about this and researching and looking, and you're already fit, when the accident happened, there was no looking back. And
Mm-hmm.
I was able to put it in motion. And basically, I needed that swift kick in my rear to commit to get going. And I am fortunate. I am lucky to have a partner in life like Nancy. When we met with Nancy back in 2000, I was on a work trip to Chicago and she was on the customer side. And when we met in the coffee room, she asked me, we haven't met before. I said, well, because I work in Seattle, I am here visiting. And she goes, what do you do in Seattle? And I didn't want to talk about work. I said, would you like to hear what I'd rather do? And she goes, what's that? And I said, well, I want to go around the world by human power. So that's how we met.
Nice.
So she knew from the get-go
that you're a weirdo.
What I was going to do this. And so when Yoran's accident happened, she had read the book. She had met Yoran in his presentation back in 2001 summer. When he came, we were there in the audience together with Nancy. And when he died, she understood it was her loss as well. And so we did not look back. And that's how it all started rolling. And by establishing a nonprofit before I started the Six Summits Project back in effective January of 2003, our mission is to educate and inspire based on stories gathered from human-powered journeys. I am doing this, I might as well serve society is really how I looked at it. So I make it a point to go into schools and do presentations, whether or not I get speaking fees. I share in my blog what I do. I make a point of reaching out. And by connecting with Ocean Recovery Alliance and Doug Woodring, I am also now adding the additional layer officially adding the additional layer of environment into my causes, my mission to educate.
That's excellent.
So we're raising awareness about plastics in our oceans. I already was talking about the stress that we're creating for all other species at their expense. As humans, we have become pests that are killing this earth slowly. We need to change our mindset and not trash this place before we leave within our 70, 80 years of lifetime here. Each one of us has to think as stewards of this earth, caretakers, that we have this special place that we want our grandchildren to experience as well. We want our grandchildren as well to see the beauty in all the species in their own glory, in ecosystems that are intact and self-supporting and thriving. So we need to think in terms of sustainability. We need to think in terms of our numbers. The big elephant in the room is that our population as humanity is just getting to a point where it is no longer sustainable. We were 1.9 billion at the turn of 20th century, 1900s. And right now we're sitting at about 8 billion. And we're going to be 10 by 2050, 10 billion. So that's just huge numbers. And only a small fraction of this world population is living in first world standards, whatever that means. So what that actually means, if you think of first world countries, is the ability to drive into the coffee shop, Starbucks, whatever, and take your coffee cup with the plastic lid and single-use cups and straws and everything, and walk out, consume without a care in the world, and to toss it when you're done, because you can afford to do that wasteful consumption. So each time we move in the first world countries, we are generating trash. When we drive our cars, we add tire dust we leave tire dust as the tires rub away on the surface of the road. That gets into the drainage systems, rain water, then runoff, then takes off from there, goes into the streams. Right now, we have a problem, for example, in the streams of Puget Sound. This is the big sound in Seattle, Tacoma area, where we have a small pod of resident orcas. They do not leave this area, and they depend on the coho salmon that comes in every season. That's their sole source of food. That's how they fatten. That's how they then, with that, they generate milk and have the young and so forth. When there are low runs on salmon, they get impacted directly because they do not leave this Puget Sound. So what I'm getting at is the tire dust has chemicals that are used to make that tire. Those chemicals affect the health of the fish fry in these small streams. And when the fish fry are impacted, the coho salmon numbers are impacted, and the rum numbers, they die. So that drives down the numbers of salmon, which stresses the orcas. So it's all interdependent.
Of course.
And our first world lifestyle dictates that we drive places. We consume without care. We burn a lot of fossil fuels to generate electricity, to drive our cars, to heat our homes, and live in bigger homes and ever bigger homes. And when you scale that up, everybody on this earth wants to have that kind of lifestyle. They deserve it. We're not going to deny it from them, but how are we going to manage this? We have already reached the carrying capacity of this earth. We are already making a mess of it. It is a total fantasy that we would actually have space colonies and go to Mars and populate that, and that kind of stuff. That's only in science fiction right now. That before that happens, we're going to trash this place and we're going to kill it. So we need to own this place. We need to become stewards of it, and we need to scale back our consumption habits. We need to dial back our consumption of, say, fossil fuels or other ingredients in our lifestyle that are actually having adverse impacts on the environment, and take a more sustainable path forward. If we dial back the first world and then bring up the rest of the world to that new standard, then we're going to be okay. But that's never going to happen if we have a selfish population that wants to drive big trucks and big SUVs and fast cars. And
I have to ask a quick side question. So have you worked with, spoken to Paul Watson from Sea Shepherd?
I follow his work. I admire their commitments, but I have not met in person.
Because listening to you speak, there are some parallels in the message, in perspective, in the mission, the importance. There are definitely some parallels in terms of where you're putting the emphasis of the message. And look, as a conservationist, I am 100% behind you.
Thank you.
It's interesting that somebody who spends, you, Paul Watson, Doug, but people who spend time out at on the ocean, out at sea, seem to come back with this perspective that is quite common to for example, just you three. So I find that quite interesting. Now, so the podcast, is framed around photography. But ultimately, the question is, if life really is a gift, how do we make every second count? And in your case, having this climbing accident was a catalyst to just say, okay, you know what? Everything doesn't need to be perfect. I just need to start, and the caravan will start following itself. Like the path will open up.
Chips will fall where they may, right?
What city are you based in? Like, where are you based in right now?
Right now, I am talking to you from Gig Harbor in the state of Washington, which is right near Tacoma, across the water from Seattle.
Okay, that's good. That just to kind of orients me a little bit better. What's your next big project? What's coming up, and how are you inspiring others to kind of, be inspired by what you're doing?
Sure. what I am going to be doing next is going to be in collaboration with Ocean Rowing Society, Ocean Rowing Society, and Ocean Recovery Alliance. We are embarking on a crossing of the Pacific Ocean from California to Hong Kong, preferably Hong Kong. The currents and the winds will dictate what happens at the final approach. The goal is to reach Hong Kong and accomplish this historic first, and I will be advancing my own records along the way. And we will be talking about the health of our oceans and ecosystems and how we are impacting the ocean's health with plastics pollution and other activities, human activities. I would be launching sometime in May, possibly even June. I'm trying to resolve the visa issue to mainland China. It's closed to foreigners right now due to the pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
That's creating a big headache for me. What to do is now a foremost big question in my mind. If I cannot line up Hong Kong and land directly there, which would give me more options on arrival. So that is a uh, challenge. So this gives you the message to everyone that in in challenging times, flexibility and adaptability is key to getting things done. The lesson that I would like to leave everyone with. My arrival will be in March next year,
Wow.
in about a year's time. Once I reach Hong Kong, then I would do the logistics and eventually that summer bicycle to Tibet to attempt Everest in post monsoon 2022 timeframe, which would be fall of 2022. From there, carry on through Kyrgyzstan, Kazakhstan to border of Russia with Georgia, where Elbrus is, climb that, pass through Turkey, bicycle on to Portugal, August of 2023, I should be in Portugal. And that fall, I would launch from Portugal to reach for Brazil or Guyanas so
Huh.
that I can go climb Aconcagua in southern South America. So that's the rough idea, timeline of what I am planning. The lesson I think that I should leave everyone with is this my observation basically. I had this dream to go around the world by human power. I hesitated and I planned and I waited. 1997 is when I traced my finger across that map. It was 2002. I had not moved yet and I was thinking about it. Accident happened, tragedy hit, and I mobilized. September 11 happened in between that time and during that 5 years. September 11, 2001 was a time of uncertainty, and that also impacted my plans and what I would do. And I was still wallowing in that uncertainty. So it took 9/11 to hold me back, tragedy to set me free. Now this pandemic hit. I've been thinking about, okay, I'm going to go complete this Six Summits project, but I had been holding back. The pandemic hit, uncertainty came. What's going to happen? There are no sponsors. Everybody is pulling back again. It's the same scenario repeating itself, and it is deja vu.
Mm-hmm.
And I was not going to sit back and wait for a tragedy to hit to mobilize again. This time I'm in charge. I am taking the initiative. I am starting. Let everyone catch up. Is how this is going to go. So I am going to reach for Hong Kong. When I get there, we'll sort the rest of it. The funding may appear by then. If it doesn't, I'll sort it out. At the very least, I will have completed the Pacific crossing
Mm-hmm.
and advanced my own records. So this is not all about records, though. I did not know if I was going to succeed. I did not start saying I'm going to set 14 Guinness World Records.
Mm-hmm.
I started out saying I am going to achieve this goal. This goal was so big that every step I took, every phase of this journey became a record.
Yeah.
I had to become and evolve into this person who could break 14 Guinness World Records and establish historic firsts.
Erden, thank you so much, man.
Well, thank you for the opportunity. I hope your audience will enjoy this conversation.
No, I hope so too.
We should do some more of this when I get to Hong Kong.
Yeah, for sure. When you come, I'd like to give you the biggest hug because I'm a huggy
Good.
kind of person.
Shooting it raw?
Yes, shooting it raw.